What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove right here on the channels. And guys, we are in the month of February. It is baseball season upon us as spring training starts less than 2 weeks as pitchers and catchers report in about 10 days or so. And we still got a couple of free agents that we're going to talk about. They just signed not too long ago, and we'll talk about whatever we need to talk about when it comes to the Mets and what else the Mets might do. Even probably small moves look like is probably the only possibility for this team right now. And what is the outlook on left field, first base, and whatever else we need to talk about with the lineup construction and what Mendoza talked about as well. Chris, how are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Happy to be back on stream here to end this weekend. Some slow, I guess, news days as far as it pertains to the Mets. I mean, we've seen some smaller minor league deals being given out to some veterans that I've talked about on the channel too. But I think, like you said, I mean, the speculation surrounding all these reporters in the Mets is that they might just be done with their major additions for this offseason, and we might see a smaller bullpen move here and there. But still some notable free agents left. I mean, I know that you have it in your title. Framber Valdez is still out there, and that's certainly interesting, and the market's interesting within itself. With Framber, I thought he would have been an Oriole already, but we do have some news here around the league. Most recently with Luis Arias, signing with the San Francisco Giants on a one-year deal to play second base. And then also, literally 5 minutes before we hopped on this stream, we got the news from John Heyman. I forgot who was first on it, but Eugenio Suarez is going to the Cincinnati Reds, 1 year, $15 million with a mutual option for that second year in Cincinnati, which I think is a really good pickup for the Reds, especially in the ballpark that they play in. And Suarez was kind of one of those guys where we know he's got immense power. He has some, I guess, ability. He plays third base, but more so maybe at this point of his career, a DH type. And I've been talking about Eugenio Suarez for the Mets for this entire offseason. But I think as we've gotten closer and closer, especially with the recent moves, especially with that 2-year deal to Polanco back in December, it was kind of like, all right, maybe they're really not looking at Suarez. But 1 year, $15 million, this guy's coming off of how many home runs? 40 plus home runs across the Diamondbacks and the Mariners. That's a really good deal for them. And I think that he's going to thrive in that ballpark. So although it doesn't pertain to the Mets, there is still some MLB news in terms of free agency this weekend.
Yeah, Eugenio Suarez in that ballpark can hit 60 home runs. He had 49 home runs last year. So I mean, in that ballpark, pop-ups go out, and they have that like force of tunnel, that wind tunnel that goes from right to right center and left center. For some reason, just jumps in that ballpark. But yeah, it's a big pickup, but it's a really good pickup for Cincinnati. And when you talk about a rise going to the Giants, it's an interesting move. I mean, the Giants really been quiet this year, and that was a team that a lot of people expected this offseason to go a little bit crazy when it comes to spending, because they've lost out on a couple of guys as well. And you thought they were going to have a big offseason, but they really haven't. And Arias is a solid ball player. Obviously, no power in that ballpark. He ain't hitting no home runs, but you know what? He can hit a lot of triples in that ballpark in right center field when he hits that ball. He's more of a singles guy, but again, more guys going to the National League. That obviously is a little bit impactful for the New York Mets. And like you said, with the Mets, with possibly just smaller moves that could happen, maybe a minor league deal here or two, or maybe they'll, pick up another reliever here or there, possibly on the market or in a trade that I know we've talked about on our channels multiple times. The Mets at this point are going to be opportunistic, right? Especially with Framber Valdez. And this is very similar to what happened with Kyle Tucker. Why wasn't he taking that Toronto Blue Jays long-term deal, and it kept on lingering and lingering? And Framber Valdez and the Orioles were linked from like day one of the offseason along with the Mets, even though the Orioles were going to make those big splashes. Obviously, they signed Alonso, and Framber Valdez would be obviously a great addition to their rotation. You still wonder, are the Mets just hanging back, and they know they can offer Framber a loaded contract for a 1-year deal, and that's David Stearns in a nutshell with that opportunistic opportunity or possibility with Framber Valdez. I'm not saying it's going to happen, But clearly, the Orioles don't want to give Framber Valdez a long-term deal, and I don't see them paying 1 year $45 million, or even a 3 year with an opt-out with 140 million, $130 million for 3 years, and then the opt-out. So sticking with Valdez real quick, Chris. Do you think the Mets will have a chance to land Valdez? And it seems like it's gonna linger into the spring training, and that would probably be the best time for the Mets to jump in. They did it with JD Martinez late in spring training. I know that's a totally different scenario, but what do you think that could be a possibility for the Mets?
I would like to say, as Brad is saying in the chat, the longer Valdez is out there, the more likelier it seems that the Mets could kind of just be, lingering there and having that offer, whatever it is, out there to him. But I just can't see it happening, man. I really can't see it happening. Of course, if you bring in Valdez, we've been talking about the necessity of offloading a different pitcher in this rotation because you've got too many arms at this point. I mean, and I know that you don't like this. I don't think many people do like this, but the way that this rotation right now, it's going to be on a 6-man rotation. It's going to be every 6 days because Kodai Senga is going to be there. He's not going to be in the bullpen. Maybe you have a guy like Manaya in the bullpen, although I highly doubt it. The way that this is laid out in front of us is that this is going to be a 6-man rotation. And I would be all on board for the Mets just swooping in and taking Valdez away from the Orioles and then making a residual move of trading a guy like David Peterson for whatever sort of maybe bullpen or offensive upgrade from thereafter. But I just don't see any inclination from what we've been hearing about the Mets in these reports that they are going to be seriously entertaining that. So I think that I've seen the Orioles as the front runners. I thought he would have already been an Oriole, like I said to begin this stream. I think the rumors are out there. I'm not sure if it's confirmed or not, but that they have like some sort of 4 or 5 year offer out there for him. But he's waiting around like he's going to get a better offer. And all of these reporters are saying, nobody knows what he's trying to do here because he's not getting a better offer than Baltimore if he wants the years. Like Baltimore is going to do that for him, and not many other teams will. The Twins could be lingering around. I think they had the second best odds behind the Orioles to go ahead and land Framber Valdez. There's been some speculation about the Giants also with their recent addition in Alvarez that they could kind of go in there and swoop in for Valdez, which would make a little bit of sense to me. But with the Mets and this Framber Valdez discussion, I think that what we see in this rotation right now with the names that we have is what we're going to get, unfortunately, Rob, because I think that this rotation has the ability to be good, but it's just there's so many question marks even still with some of these guys and how they're going to perform and follow up 2025. You've got Freddie, you've got Nolan. That's a great 1-2 combo. David Peterson pitched the most innings he's ever pitched in his career last year. He fell off the face of the earth in the second half. Sean Manaea, how is he going to bounce back, from injury? We're going to get 2025 Manaea or 2024 Manaea. And then Clay Holmes year 2, is he going to take a step up? He had actually a nice year, did Clay Holmes. I'll give him credit for that. First year as a starter, but we need more out of him as well, especially pertaining to the length of the innings going into 5 1/3, 5 2/3, 6 innings pitched, and that goes for all of these guys too. Freddie, in his intro press conference, basically stated that he knows that it's his goal to pitch longer into baseball games. Not that he hasn't already, but that it's his goal to continue that. And that's what he's striving for, as well as his durability in producing that 170, 180 inning mark that he's done over the last handful of seasons. So with the rotation, I got to just guess right now with the best educated guess of what Salmon and all these guys are saying is that they're done adding to the rotation.
Yeah, and I was listening to WFAN today. Pat Ragazzo came on with Al Cintron earlier today, and he came up with a couple of points of the Mets went to one of Senga's workouts, I guess in Florida or wherever he was, and looking like he was healthy. He looked strong and all that stuff. Again, I can care less about him. I think they should get rid of him, but clearly they don't seem like they're going to. The issue that I have, the Mets are placating once again to Kodai Senga, who is basically a fourth or fifth starter in this rotation. Let's be honest about that. Clay Holmes is probably going to be your number 3. David Peterson's going to be your number 4. And you're going to work around Shomanaya and Kodai Senga. And the issue is the 6-man rotation. Your best pitcher now, who is Freddie Peralta, that you traded top prospects for, loves to pitch. And in his opening, when he talked to the media, he says he feels at his best when he pitches every 5th day. So how are you going to placate Kodai Senga with your ace and Freddie Peralta, who you traded for to be your ace, and now you're placating a guy who is hanging on by a thread in this rotation? And Brad brought this up in a comment as well, and that's what I was thinking. I don't like it. I really don't. This is another David Stearns situation that he put himself into yet again, where he didn't think there's any value for Kodai Senga, which I still find that hard to believe. If you're going to pay someone that salary, you can get somebody to pick up Kodai Senga. David Stearns just don't want to do it. He'd rather keep a guy just because you can't get value on the market. Not saying it's a bad thing, but I honestly think Kodai Senga is going to be a problem once again in this rotation. It just doesn't make sense in a 6-man rotation. It really doesn't at this point, right? It doesn't help. Who does it help? Who does it really help? Did it help Clay Holmes? Kinda. But, guys like David Peterson, it didn't help him basically, even when they were trying to do extra days off. He actually broke down as well. And you look at Kodai Senga, who continues to get hurt. So this extra days off and, placating the Kodai Senga doesn't make him the top pitcher he was supposed to be for this Mets franchise. And we have to stop. It's getting annoying at this point because we're getting to pitchers and catchers. They're going to say everything they possibly can say to say that Kodai Senga is good and he's fine, but he's fragile. He's mentally fragile and he's physically fragile. And this really does have to stop. And I'm hoping they're hyping this guy up to get him the hell out of here. I truly believe that, because you know what? Here's an option. Call the Baltimore Orioles. If they don't land Framber Valdez, talk to them about Kodai Senga. I guarantee you they take him. You might not get a lot for him, but you know what? This rotation is going to be better without Kodai Senga. I don't trust him. I don't care if he's the 3rd starter, 5th starter. It just doesn't make sense to me, Chris. And it's kind of annoying. It's stupid that David Stearns still has to convince us, because this is what he's doing. How long has Kodai Senga been here? 3 years? Ever since he took over, he's trying to convince us that that Kodai Senga is a really good pitcher and a top pitcher. And that's the way he acts, like that he's trying to convince us that he's still a trustworthy pitcher in this rotation. And he's absolutely not. And by the way, did David Stearns forget that this guy quit on this team in September when they needed pitching? That's the guy you want in this rotation? I don't like it at all. I really don't.
Yeah, it really is. What version of Kodai Senga are we going to get? I mean, if we get the first half version of Kodai Senga last year, I mean, I'll take that. I'm pretty sure anybody would, with the sort of trajectory that he was on. But, one thing goes wrong for Senga, and he's not going to push through any injuries. Not that anybody would expect him to, but, even when he's coming back, what did he do? He went down to Florida. He complained about the heat. He didn't feel right, which good on him, because you don't want to come up and throw 93 and get absolutely shelled when your team needs you. But on the flip side of the coin, it's like your team needed you. You know what I mean? And you're not here. Yeah, so that's that. So it's really the version that we're going to get from Kodai Senga. But the injury history speaks for itself, Rob, and I agree with you in this aspect. It's a very huge risk. Like, this is where I put this Mets rotation, honestly. And this is the same thing towards the bottom of the lineup with a guy like, Vientos or Francisco Alvarez, etc. If these guys are going to perform to their utmost capability, this is a good squad. This is a really good squad. And this rotation is going to be more than good. But that's relying on the factors of what I just mentioned with Kodai Senga keeping his health, because he starts off the season, he feels good, right? Like last year, he felt good. We had no complaints. Maybe we were finally going to get a healthy Kodai Senga that we saw in 2023, and then the Pete Alonso errant throw. And then we didn't get the same version. Like, we did not get Kodai Senga before that injury, because once that happens to him, it's like a mountain to climb for him to get back to what he was. And that's the unfortunate, and that's also just probably due to his age too. I would have to imagine this guy's not getting any younger. Make no mistake about that. But Kodai Senga, and really for me, Sean Manaea. Peterson, I can see maybe, with his offseason regimen, being a little bit more durable, understanding that he kind of fell off when he was getting to the 140, 150, 160 inning mark. But for me, I'm looking at Kodai Senga and Sean Manaea in particular. Sean Manaea decided to forego the surgery to clean up the loose bodies in the elbow. I'm not saying that's going to be a big issue, but if you do that, you are telling the organization, you are telling fans that you are good to go. So any hiccup along the road here in spring training and the beginning of the season, if he goes down with any sort of injury, it's going to be like, oh no, here we go again. And that's just the way I feel about this rotation. At its maximum, I could see them being a powerhouse unit and really propelling this team to the playoffs and beyond. At its worst, we're going to have a disasterful 2025-esque rotation moving forward if these guys don't pick up the slack. But of course, as the Pobo and a guy that's building this team, you're naturally going to lean toward the tendency of these guys are going to figure it out eventually. And I would have to imagine if David Stearns has these guys around even still, if he really wanted Senga off this team, I would imagine no matter what return he was going to get, he would have made that move. That's what I think personally, because there was a lot of different avenues for David Stearns to go off of and do that. But him keeping him around clearly shows that he still has confidence. And David Stearns is taking a huge gamble. We've talked about this all off season, right? He's taking a huge gamble with, the way that he's going about rebuilding this roster. So now this is the David Stearns team. And we say this, we have said this after every single move that he made this offseason. This is his product now.
Yep.
He's had enough time to kind of understand and mold his team together for what we're going to see in 2026, 2027, and beyond. And one of these decisions that he is basically, I guess, acting as a representation of himself as president of baseball operations is keeping Kodai Senga around. That's a direct reflection of David Stearns. Yeah. And so clearly he trusts him enough to have that happen. So 6-man rotation, 5-man rotation, whatever it is. I didn't think it was funny that Freddie Peralta also said that he likes going every 5 days, like you said too. And I was like, I put a tweet out there saying that Kodai Senga better take notes, man, because as long as he's in this rotation, that's the worst thing about this all is that you have to basically give into what he wants. Like, you have to mold the entire rotation around Kodai Senga. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying that the other arms are complaining, right? I don't know if they want an extra day of rest or not. I'm not sure if it's a big deal to them. But it's just, if any little thing goes wrong, like you said, Rob, that is the one thing that we will leave this conversation with, is that once something goes wrong, it's basically irreversible for Kodai Senga, as history would tell us.
Yeah, and with his history, something will. It just always does. And everybody keeps on going back to 2023 in his first year. There was no pressure on him. There was none. They were giving him. He was pitching every 7th day. He was getting taken out as early as possible in games, and that was it. But when the Mets when they pushed him the following season when they pushed him that year, and then 2024, we know what happened. You seen the type of pitcher he became. And he was great in the beginning of the year, but he has not pulled a full season together since 2023. And even when he was younger in Japan, he had a history of injuries and issues with, all types of soft tissue injuries that he dealt with in Japan. So the Mets and MLB teams knew about Senga and his injury history. So it shouldn't be a surprise, but at this point, I think the Mets are going to do a 5-man rotation. And if Kodai Senga can't figure it out, well, you figure it out. You want to pitch him every now and then. You got back-to-back. If you have like a 10-game stretch and you want to pitch him once in those 10-game stretch, he loves days off. So let him pitch once a week, once every 10 days. I mean, I just don't understand why you're going to placate him when he's basically going to be a back-end rotation guy at this point. And a lot of people are talking about Senga and Manaea basically fighting for a job. A $25 million man, another Stearns prodigy, and Kodai Senga, who's not making a lot of money, but was supposed to, according to David Stearns, like last year, he was going to be our ace. So, or at least a top in our rotation. So, it's funny you said that, this is Stearns' team. Last year, it was his bullpen and his rotation that he put together. The lineup was still not his product for the most part. And the bullpen and the rotation started to mold into what he wanted, and it was a complete disaster. So, again,
Well,
he's
the
going to
bullpen was good until the rotation fell apart,
Sure.
basically.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, the bullpen doesn't stay good unless the rotation is solid. At least pretty good. The rotation is almost a reflection of what the bullpen outcome is probably going to be, because you can't overuse a bullpen. You overuse a
Yeah.
bullpen, you're going to run into trouble. I'm not talking about April or early May when you're giving guys, taking guys out early to protect their innings as rotation guys. But we also, I don't have to remind anybody, but it's going to be interesting because this is David Stearns' baby right now. And listen, he better get it right. Because I tell you right now, you think Mendoza's, if it's a bad season, Mendoza's getting fired because David Stearns needs a scapegoat. And the chopping block is next on David Stearns' neck. That's basically what's going to happen. And I don't think, because I don't think Steve Cohen is going to be as patient as everybody believes. He loves David Stearns. He waited for David Stearns, but you can't go have a back-to-back season where you have over a $350 million payroll and you're going to miss the playoffs. That's a disaster. And somebody needs to be held responsible. And if it's only Mendoza, it's kind of stupid. But we'll see. It's going to be
Let's project this out, though. And by the way, great comment here from Mets fan 123. Thank you for the super chat as well, stating that think that they're giving Senga one last chance until the deadline, because that's a very realistic possibility too. Okay. Because you've got Jonah Tong, who's going to be starting off the season, I would assume, in AAA. And I think that they will not even hesitate to make that call up or put Tobias Myers into the rotation for the time being if Kodai Senga doesn't perform or if he gets injured yet again. So, just see what version, as I mentioned before, of Senga you're going to get for the first half. Is it a good one? Is it the one that we all are questioning right now? And then make a move accordingly. And even if he does well, I'm sure that also boosts his trade value. And so if the Mets believe enough in Jonah Tong, I think they would just keep him at that point if he's doing well in the first half of the season. But if he builds his trade value, that's just another arm that David Stearns can wheel and deal at the trade deadline too for a team that really needs a rotation starter. But you can never have too many arms in the rotation, as we all know, with the injuries that stockpile and accumulate. And I think at that point, that'd be a lot of pressure to put on Jonah Tong. And it really is about how Jonah Tong develops and how he comes back from last season and some of the shakiness that we saw from him. But let's project this out, right? The rotation. We've got Freddie, we've got Nolan, and who would you put as your number 3? Because I made a little bit of a rotation projection, and I put Peterson as my number 3, but a lot of people were disagreeing with that. How would you make the rotation from like 3 all the way to 6?
Well, the reason why I think I agree with you with David Peterson is because of the left-hander in that rotation. I don't think they want 3, 4 right-handers in a row and then David Peterson. Because you do have Mania obviously, but we don't know if Mania is going to be in this rotation, right? We really don't know. And I mean, I think they would love to have Peterson and Mania in this rotation to split up the righties, but again, these are back end rotation guys. That's the unfortunate part with the Mets rotation right now on the back end. So yeah, obviously Peralta, McLean. I think they're going to put Peterson 3 only because of just to break up the righties a little bit, and Clay Holmes 4, and then who knows what the 5th man, if they go to a 6th man, who knows?
Mania Senga then at that point.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would just put Myers in the rotation.
Yeah. But so then who are you putting in the bullpen? Mania or?
I'm saying that's why Myers is going to go into the bullpen because it doesn't seem like they're going to make any more moves. And he's that Swiss Army knife. He's like the long man in that bullpen that they can use. So, yeah, I mean, I guess you have to put David Peterson 3. But again, look, I always said that you need two top starters in your rotation, because then you can play around with your 3, 4, 5. You can get by on guys like Peterson, Minaya, Senga, or whoever else you want to talk about. Possibly Tong, maybe mid middle of the season, But I it's tough because David Peterson broke down. Kodai Senga was injured. Minaya was injured. Minaya can never catch his footing. Is Minaya ever going to be what we seen in 2024? If not, the Mets are going to have a problem in the back end of the rotation. And you know what? I'd rather have a problem at the back end of the rotation than the front part of the rotation, because it's easier to get a number 3, a number 4, a number 5 if you need it come trade deadline. It's a little easier to figure out than trying to get a top pitcher at the trade deadline, because it's hard to do. It really is. So, yeah, I would go David Peterson 3 just to split up the righties a little bit. I honestly think they're going to try everything they can to get Minaya in this rotation. But again, he didn't have – I don't understand Sean Minaya, to be quite honest with you. Why would you not get those loose bodies taken out of the elbow? I know, again, it's his body. It's his choice when it comes to the, what he wants to do with his body. The team can't force him to do it. But, I mean, that's a dangerous game to play, because I don't know if anybody had loose bodies in their elbow. I know I had. I got it removed. It hurts. I mean, it might be great for 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden – they float around in there and find a wrong spot, and it's painful. And I don't know how can you pitch like that every 5th day. And, it can start while you're throwing a bullpen before a game to warm up. That's the scary part. So, for whatever reason, I hope he got a couple of doctors' opinions about it, because if he's just doing it just because he didn't feel like having surgery, that's a dangerous game to play when this team paying you $25 million a year. So unfortunately for us, the Mets are going to really try to get Minaya, I guess, in this rotation. But I don't know. The back end is going to be an issue, I think, because, we don't know. Clay Holmes is a big part of this rotation. We all know that. Throwing 170 innings last year, the most in his career. Again, I talk about guys all the time, and we talked about it with Minaya, Severino. Severino was fine, but guys like Minaya that have not thrown a lot of innings in either a couple of years or at all, we don't know what we're going to get from a guy like Clay Holmes at all. Like, is he going to be able to pitch 150, 160 innings and get close to that number again, innings-wise? Because when you're a middle-of-the-rotation guy, you got to be that innings eater as well. And Clay Holmes was an innings eater for us. Honestly, he didn't pitch a lot of innings per game, but he threw 170 innings. So that's something that you need. You need at least 2 guys that can throw that at the very least. And with Peralta, you know what you're going to get. Nolan McLean, again, Pat Ragazzo on WFAN today when he was talking said that he doesn't think that Nolan McLean has an innings limit. And he is pitching in the WBC, which is scary enough. And they're not limiting his innings in the WBC as well. That's
who is that?
Nolan McLean.
Nolan McLean, yeah.
He's saying that they're not limiting his innings in the WBC. Again, how many innings is he going to throw? I don't know, but again, we know that the Diaz injury kind of really hurt the Mets that year, and it kind of spiraled out of control with the start of the season with not having Diaz. You can't lose Nolan McLean. You just can't. But again, innings-wise, if there's no innings limit on Nolan McLean, great. And with Freddie Peralta, you would think he would get between 150 and 160 innings, give or take 29, 30 starts with Nolan McLean, along with Freddie Peralta. So that's 340 innings, hopefully, from your top 2 guys, which is very important. And obviously they have to pitch well as well. Also, but yeah, David Peterson, I think, is kind of the big component to this rotation when it comes to, we've seen how good he can be when he's on, and he can be a top 2 pitcher. That is how good David Peterson is. We've seen it. I mean, he was a big part of that 2024 team when he came back. If you can get close to that, then we can have a real conversation about having a really, really good rotation. Right now, it's top heavy, and everybody else is a big question mark, Chris. So it's going to be interesting. But I do agree with you, David Peterson as your 3.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's the two lefties for me too. I mean, Senga, as I mentioned, he's going to be very integral and important part of the success, but also it's just, Peterson, is he going to be able to produce that day in and day out over the course of 162 and not fall off in August time? And then Manaya is the real wild card for me and what we can expect out of him. So the rotation, though, is what it is. And barring anything unforeseen with Tobias Myers making some starts in between and a guy like Jonah Tong coming up, that's who we have to work with at this point, Rob. So I guess we better get used to it, for better or for worse. But I think that, as I mentioned, there is still some sense of confidence out of me in this rotation moving forward. We just have to figure out those question marks. That's it.
Yep, exactly. So again, the rotation, we know it's top heavy. Nolan McLean, Freddie Peralta, we're all very excited about 3 through 5 or 6 is a big question mark, with multiple injuries, possibilities, with, breaking down during the season is all a question from 3 through 6 in this rotation. And that's something that, we're going to have to live and die with, like Chris said. And, hopefully the top 2 guys can carry this team up until the deadline, and then you can make your move to get another starting pitcher in here that's worth getting at the deadline. So the next big question mark is left field. Left field is something that, Cody Bellinger, Kyle Tucker, and then it was nobody. It was another infielder in Bo Bichette, and this is where the Mets are right now, Chris, with left
Austin
field.
Hayes, who signed, we forgot in the whole
Yeah,
spiel at the
the
front
White Sox.
end here. He went to the White Sox. So that was the guy that I was eyeing because
Yeah.
now you're going to be stuck with, not saying stuck, in a negative sense, but let's be honest, we don't know what Brett Beatty's going to produce out there in left field. It's a very big adjustment for infielders to go out there, especially with first step reads, back on baseballs and not having the tendency to move forward and get burned with a line drive over your head. So, yeah, we'll see. Carson Benge, I'm just hoping he tears it up in spring training to give
No.
David Stearns no excuses to not put him on this roster.
Yeah, and we all heard Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo says it's harder to play left field than center field at City Field. It's not an easy left field to play at City Field. The wind direction, that's the one area where there's a wind tunnel by left field that the ball jumps out of nowhere and you're not expecting it. And Nimmo lost enough balls over his head over the last couple of when he was playing left field for a year and a half. That is something that I don't know that Brett Beatty can do. And for everybody that only cares about the bat, defense can kill you. Defense can really kill you. And I don't want to see Brett Beatty go out there worrying about playing left field, playing angles, and what does he have to do to play a good left field. I need him to worry about his bat. Again, Brett Beatty lost his job because the Mets signed Bo Bichette. We all love the Bo Bichette signing. We love the quick pivot by Stearns, but it took the job away from Brett Beatty. The same fans that were bitching and moaning about Brett Beatty being on this team last year are the same ones complaining, oh, how can you trade Brett Beatty? As I did a video the other day in regards to why is Brett Beatty not used as an asset at this point when all we're talking about here is DH and platoon and DH, platoon in left field, platoon in first base. Chris, what word do we hate the most in the baseball language? Platoon. Right? The Mets can't figure out a goddamn DH to save their life. Since it's been implemented, they've had one of the worst offensive DH numbers in baseball. Since it's been implemented in the National League. That's a joke. That is a joke. So let's platoon DH. Why the hell not, right? Because it's worked so well for the New York Mets. Left field platoon. We have to hope that Carson Benz, like you said, Chris, take that big step in spring training. I hope he does. And what does that do? And look, we all want Carson Benz to succeed. If Carson Benz blows up in spring training, he's going to be our left fielder. Great. So now that 500 at bats that Brett Beatty supposedly is going to get in the stratosphere of the season that David Stearns is talking about, that ain't happening. Everybody just assumes, oh, we can just give 500 at bats to Beatty, 500 at bats to Vientos, Polanco. Where? Unless these guys are starting every day, they're losing at bats. And that's why I hate the platoon. If you're gonna put Polanco at first base, put him at first base. If you're gonna DH Vientos, DH Vientos. Somebody's got to sit on the bench. And I've said this for a while, Chris, and I'll say it again. Brett Beatty isn't made for the bench. We've been there. It hasn't worked. Same thing goes for Mark Vientos when he lost his job last year. They tried to play him sporadically. He was terrible. These guys need to play every day. And this whole platoon nonsense doesn't make them play every day. Because guess what's going to happen, Chris? We all know what's going to happen. Somebody's going to be hot as a DH or wherever they're platooning. They're going to stay in the lineup. Same thing goes for the other position. They're going to be hot. Guess who's sitting on the bench? The guy that should be playing and should be getting at bats, but can't get it because the positions that he does play, these guys are hot. So he's going to sit down for 3-4 days, maybe get a couple of pinch hit appearances, defensive replacement possibilities, but he's going to go into games cold. And that has been the major issue with the New York Mets in their platooning situation. And now they could possibly be platooning in 3 positions in their lineup: left field, first base, and DH. That is a lot of platooning for 3 guys that all, well, at least with Vientos and Beatty, have lost their jobs in back-to-back years. And Polanco, who is a guy who plays every day as a veteran, you're going to sit him too to play Beatty and Vientos? It's stupid, to be quite honest with you. It doesn't make sense.
Which is why that's the exact reason why this whole entire offseason, when we got Polanco, and definitely when we got Bichette, I mean, almost certainly when we got Bichette, I was saying it would be in the Mets' best interest if they really do have Carson Benge on their minds for opening day to go ahead and deal one of these guys. I don't care who it is. I know that Mets fans are very split on Beatty and Vientos. I could care less. One of these guys has enough value to get something worthwhile in return. Beatty probably has, with his positional flexibility, the better trade value at this point. I'm not going to discount Mark Vientos and the hitter that he was in 2024. And you take a look at the side-by-side comparisons, Vientos had a god-awful season in 2025, and his numbers were still eerily close to Brett Beatty's numbers, who had the best season of his career. I know the OPS and the average were kind of a little bit, off, but you talk about the home runs, 17 for Vientos, 18 for Beatty. The doubles, Vientos cleared Beatty in. I'm not saying Vientos is the better player. I like Brett Beatty a lot. I think both these guys will be good. It's just that, if Benge is your left fielder, these guys aren't playing every day. And I don't need to see a platoon. I don't need to see Vientos on the bench. I don't need to see Brett Beatty on the bench. These guys are everyday players, or at least they should be, with the way the Mets have been treating them over the past couple of seasons and giving them all these opportunities left and right. And so that's what doesn't make sense. But now I'm thinking that no matter what happens, because I think we can all agree, if Carson Benge goes out there and smokes the baseball, plays an exceptional outfield in spring training, it would be a horrendous look for the Mets to send him to AAA to start the season. I think that would be a massive mistake. But I can still see them doing it because that would give Vientos and Beatty an everyday shot alongside Polanco come opening day for at least a couple of weeks of the season. Polanco will probably be your first baseman. Vientos will be your DH. And then Brett Beatty in this experiment out there in left field is going to be your everyday left fielder in that scenario. And that's just still a lot of question marks to me. Polanco at first base, how is he going to fare there? Beatty in left field, how is he going to do there? We've already got to worry about Bichette playing third base. It could be a smooth transition for him. It could not be. We don't know. So that's what I'm kind of wondering right now. But the one thing about it is we all know the service time manipulation, Rob. We know that teams love to do this, and they will continue to do this as long as it prolongs these players' free agency date on the back end to save them that 1 year, right? And that April 8th, around that week right there, is going to be, I think, the cutoff for the eligibility when prospects will be getting called up. I'm not sure if it's exactly April 8th. I tried to do the math on one of my previous videos, but it's 172 days of the season worth of service time, whether you're on the 26-man roster or whether you're on the IL, but still a part of that roster. It's one of those things where these teams don't play around about the controllability of the prospects. And I just don't think that they're going to try to lose that year on Carson Benge. Now,
Mhm.
we've seen the Mets, I guess, kind of be split in that aspect and, prospects prior, but if Beatty and Vientos are still both on this roster, I think that we both agree at this point that a trade of either of these guys right now is highly unlikely to end the offseason based off of what Will Salmon was saying. There is no room on this roster for Carson Benge. There's not. You're
Yeah,
not going to call him up, and make him part of the opening day Major League roster if you're going to be putting him on the bench. So that's just, you might as well just start him off in AAA at that point and save the service time. You know what I'm saying?
like
And so that just doesn't, like, that merry-go-round of platooning and positional working there at first base, DH, left field also doesn't make sense. So going into spring training, are you really giving Carson Benge the opportunity to prove himself to be on the Major League roster? Or are you just saying that to blow smoke up our asses and then, send him back down to AAA no matter what happens? So that's what I don't understand. And that's something that we will see moving forward. I hope Carson Benge goes out there and tears the cover off the baseball. And I hope he forces David Stern's hand, because I think that he's that good of a prospect, an all-fields hitter, has some pop, good defender. But in that scenario, Rob, I think Vientos is going to be on your bench. I think
well,
Vientos is going to be on your bench.
that's the thing with David Stearns. He doesn't look at it from the baseball everyday perspective. He looks at it on paper, how it just makes sense that you can get 500 at bats for everybody. But those 500 at bats, some of them might not matter because you're bringing them up, maybe 100 and something at bats in situations where these guys are cold. And that's why I just don't understand it. Like, and you make a great point, right? Why, they were trying to get, like, if they love Carson Benge so much, why were you trying to get Tucker? Why were you trying to go after Cody Bellinger? Why? When you already have Beatty on this roster and you said you were going to use him as a utility guy once you got Bo Bichette or after you got Bo Bichette, right? It just didn't make sense. That's where we talked about it so much last year, that the roster construction was so badly put together because there was too many guys sitting on the benches, and all you do as a president of baseball ops is screw your manager in the game-to-game, everyday game decisions, where he has to set up a lineup and he has to worry about giving guys at bats instead of worrying about putting the best guy in the lineup every day. That's, if you looked at what Mendoza did last year, was the dumbest thing that he kept on doing. Was he was trying to play players that probably weren't playing well, but was trying to get at bats when he can, and sitting guys that were having good weeks. It made no sense. And do I blame Mendoza? No, because he probably has Stearns in his ear saying, "Hey, you got to play these guys." But again, Stearns plays the analytical game. He puts the game on paper. It doesn't work out like that. We all look at the team on paper, the lineup on paper, the rotation, the bullpen, and it looks gorgeous. It looks beautiful. Nothing can go wrong. But we know how it goes. There is no way that if Carson Benge makes this team, that Beatty, Vientos, and Polanco are going to get 500 at-bats, because it's just hard to do it. It really is. Because you can't put guys that have not played in games because you got to get them at bats just because you have to, which I think it's bullshit. This is why I want veterans on the bench, because veterans know their roles. Jose Iglesias, when they got him, he knew his role. With injuries and bad play, he was able to start every day. But this is why I don't want young kids, guys that were top prospects in their system. You're going to sit them on the bench and make them platoon players. Like, Beatty won the job. You took his job away, and now you tell him to sit on the bench and hopefully play and get 500 at-bats. Vientos, the same thing. Like, it's just stupid. Like, are you going to give playing time to Vientos and Beatty over Polanco? No. You just gave him a contract. You gave him a 2-year deal. You're not sitting Polanco. Yeah, he's injury prone. Sure. Yeah, you can DH him here and there. So that means Polanco is still going to be in the lineup, which, again, take somebody out of the lineup regardless. That's why it doesn't make sense.
It could be Simeon. I mean, it could be Simeon as the odd man out if you shift Brett Beatty over to second base, or maybe even
But
Bo Bichette.
what if Simeon plays well? You know what I'm saying? If these
No,
guys
I
play
agree.
well, nobody's sitting.
I agree.
That's the problem. That's what I'm saying. Like, talking about platoons and getting 500 at bats for everybody, you're basically hoping for guys to not have play well, because that's how you get guys at bats.
And and the trickle down effect here too is that this heavily impacts Ronnie Mauricio, and any playing time that he was hoping for is basically out the window. If you got Vientos and Beatty and one of those guys maybe even being on the bench, I think Ronnie could be starting off in AAA too, depending on how the rest of this bench looks like. So
and 2 years ago, he was supposed to be outside in their basement before he got hurt in the Dominican Winter League.
exactly.
Right? So again, this is why, when we look at value of players or top prospects that were once top prospects, all you're doing is hurting their value. So when you try to trade them, you can't. Like Vientos seemed like he was untradeable. The White Sox didn't want Vientos at that time at the trade deadline. And all of a sudden this year, Stearns didn't want to give up Vientos for Luis Robert Jr. and ended up being Acuna. That's the other thing. A guy like Mauricio, who has a ton of talent, is a guy that's not going to get playing time over Beatty or Vientos. He's a switch hitter. He shows he has power. He's got speed. He does have a good glove. He's an all-around player, at least, in the eyes of a 5-tool player. But he might not even be even a thought about in this roster unless somebody gets hurt. So, left field, first base, DH. It looks great on paper getting all these guys at bats. Again, Carson Benge doesn't make the team, it solves your problem, right? Left field, Brett Beatty, DH, Vientos, Polanco, first base. Great. But they better perform, because if they don't, and Carson Benge shows that he's not ready, well, the Mets are in their world of shit. Because now you got positions that are a problem once again in the lineup, and now we're talking about a top-heavy lineup once again that the Mets can't afford to have, Chris. And that's the other thing, too, because we're hoping on Brett Beatty, we're hoping on Mark Vientos, we're hoping on Polanco. Let's say Benge doesn't make the team. That is your lineup, right? Left field, Beatty, DH, Vientos, Polanco, first base. They also got to hit, because what do you do if they don't? There's what options? Tyrone Taylor in left field? Does that excite anybody? No. Right? Is Mauricio going to get an opportunity over Vientos or Beatty? Right? Beatty and Vientos, they don't have no minor league options. So what do? Does Beatty have one maybe? Vientos, I don't believe, has any.
Let me check that.
Because that's another important part. We know David Stearns, has a direct train going back and forth to the minors and the majors. So, that's
But
important.
I mean, I see someone's comment here. Blade saying Ronnie still might be a stud. We'll never know, though. We'll never know, because he's not going to get the playing time in order to prove that he is. And I think that's the roundabout conversation that we're trying to have right here, is that you just won't ever see and realize the full potential of these guys if you're giving them half the at-bats that they should be getting. And that's what Rob is saying about Vientos and Beatty. That's what I'm saying about Ronnie Mauricio. And it's just kind of a moot point at that point when you have this much depth. Depth is never a bad thing. Let's make no mistake about it. But a lot of depth should be coming from veteran presence. Like you said, these young guys either need to be playing or need to be traded to go ahead and backfill the rest of your roster and shore up the other parts that are a little bit, I guess, messy right now. And so that's just not making sense. Instead, the New York Mets depth is youthful talent that are trying to find any sort of playing time. And one thing we know about young talent, historically speaking, especially with the Mets in recent years, is that inconsistent playing time is not the best formula to get the best out of them production-wise. So that's something that we need to be just conscious of moving forward.
And David, again, I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead. I'm still looking at this Vientos Beatty thing.
David Stearns, the guy who talked all offseason about young players, signed Polanco, traded for Simeon, and brought in Bichette, veteran guys. So, again, that's why when he talks, I don't listen to him, because he talks a bunch of bullshit. I don't think he believes in enough of these players, these younger players. I just don't think so. I think that if he doesn't find value in them on the trade market, he just holds on to them and hopes for the best. Like, he is hoping for these guys to like somebody to establish themselves and take a job, which is nice. But again, at the end of the day, you're hurting somebody because again, is if Carson Benz wins this job in left field, let's say he's a dynamic player. You don't have to be dynamic, but he looks really good in spring. He's your starting left fielder. It's going to be very interesting to see what the Mets are going to do with Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos because at first base is going to be Polanco Gackers.
Beatty has one option. Vientos has none remaining.
Again, that is a huge problem for David Stearns. It really is because you could send Brett Beatty down one more time. Wonderful. Like, is it AJ Ewan and Jacob Reimer the next guys? Because there's your
They
other
are
problem.
actually. I
Yeah,
can't listen. I know that. Listen, I dropped a video for the shout out to those of y'all who viewed my video earlier today. I wanted to release that video, just talk about prospects. Like I know we are a little bit delayed in making this stream and going live here. We had some technical difficulties beforehand, but I talked about AJ Ewing and Jacob Reimer. I talked about prospects like Ryan Clifford coming up too. And the crazy thing about this roster is that we're talking about all these veterans, but you're talking about a situation where David Stearns really could be relying on these guys coming up, like Ewing and Reimer in the next couple of years, because Marcus Semien is here for what, 3 years guaranteed. I guarantee you that last year of his deal, he's going to be a bench guy. He's not going to be starting on this team. Polanco's only going to be here for 2 years. Bichette is only guaranteed 1 year, and then he can opt out. So we could be doing this all over again, and we could be talking about even more prospects coming up and taking major league spots next season. And maybe that's what David Stearns wants. Maybe that's what he's been hoping for all along. Don't commit any long-term money because he likes a guy like Jacob Reimer, who's a very good prospect, by the way. I think he's the most underrated prospect in the Mets farm system right now that is not garnering as much hype as he should. He reminds me a lot of Brett Beatty. I'm not going to lie to you. He reminds me a lot of Brett Beatty with the type of hitter and the command of the zone that he has. But it's just it's that we're talking about a team that should be contending, and we're worrying about prospects that are supposed to be coming up next season, year after that. And it's just like, we hope that this merry-go-round is going to work in 2026 because our eyes should be laser focused here. I think David Stearns, in my personal opinion, has built this roster looking in both directions, looking at the near term right here in 2026, while also leaving room, which every GM is doing. Let's make no mistake about it, but not to this magnitude. We don't see teams that are going to be going over potentially a complete overhaul yet again, even with all these brand new faces, Rob. So this is a very unique position that David Stearns has put this team in. It's a little bit of a gamble if I'm being completely honest, but I'm just hoping that it pays off because of all these question marks. I just get to the bottom line of all these question marks that this roster still has. I still think that the personnel that this team possesses with the names, they can do some serious damage. It's up to David Stearns and Carlos Mendoza to get a correct game plan down to address every single question that we are proposing that's going to happen and needs to be figured out in 2026. But they have the talent in order to figure it out. There just has to be the proper method to the madness. That's what I think.
Yeah, it's a chess game with the lineup, and they got to figure it out because they didn't figure it out last year with the terrible roster construction, and the lineup never seemed to be figured out 5 through 9, and it cost the team a lot. And now it should be a deeper lineup, right? We talked about this. It should be a deeper lineup. A lot of guys especially at the top of the order, don't strike out a lot. That is a huge deal for this team that had many guys at the top of the order had 200 plus strikeouts during their seasons. Like these guys strike out 100 times, especially at the top of the order, 112, like very better than average with the lack of strikeouts, which is a good sign. And we talked about how many guys can hit 20 plus home runs. Obviously Lindor and Soto, those guys can hit more, but all through this lineup, guys can hit 20 plus home runs. That is something that the Mets did not have. They had nothing at the back end of this lineup. And, speaking of somebody that hasn't been talked about a lot, that's Francisco Alvarez. A guy that I think has one more shot to be considered a part of this team long term, because there is no way Francisco Alvarez gets another shot after this year. He's got to figure out a way to stay healthy. I know it's a lot of bad luck with his injuries. But you know what? Sometimes you got to make your own luck. I know it sucks as a catcher. It's hard to stay healthy. I understand that. But this is why I don't like top prospect catchers that are so overhyped, because these guys get beat up during the year. And when you're counting on him to be a big part of your offense, he's your catcher. These guys break down so much. And again, there was a video today on X that Alvarez was working out, taking some batting practice in the cages. Nice to see. But I have a tremendous amount of, questions in my mind about Francisco Alvarez. Do I think that he got better defensively last year when he finally figured it out in the minors? Yes. Is that thumb going to hold up? That poor thumb is so mangled at this point that is it going to hold up through an entire season? Right. And we all know if that hand's a problem, his hitting's going to be a problem. He's got all the talent in the world. We know he has tremendous power. I'd like him to, not overswing all the time, which he started to do after he came back from the minors after an injury. He's got to be a guy. He's another key to this lineup that is a huge question mark. Another question mark. But Francisco Alvarez, do you think that this is probably his last opportunity to prove that, one, he can stay healthy, and two, he can be that at least close to that offensive talent that we were all expecting when he first came up?
Yeah, maybe. What is he? I think he's going to be a free agent after the 2029 season, if I'm not mistaken. So that's still a lot of time there for them to figure something out. It's just that this position has just been a thorn in the Mets' sides for so long, man, this catching position. So, we were all really hype about Francisco Alvarez. I still have a lot of hope for him. And I think that he's actually, him and Robert Jr., if they can provide a spark offensively for the bottom of this lineup, this
Mhm.
lineup is as deep as it gets, to be honest, in all of baseball, especially with
Yeah.
who you have hitting at the top. I get it that you sacrifice some power in letting Pete Alonso walk, and you got Bichette. Bichette's more of like a 20 home run guy, not really much beyond that. And Polanco, same thing, coming off 26 home runs, but he's not really a 25 plus home run guy every year. You got better with runners in scoring position at the 3 and 4 spots. That is not even a question of what Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo got you versus what you're going to get out of Bichette and Polanco should everybody stay healthy. But the bottom of this lineup, Francisco Alvarez is the key. And I think it's about one, he has a tendency to pull off the baseball. I think we all understand that. But I think his pitch selection, just like Ronnie Mauricio, the same reason why Ronnie Mauricio was struggling, and Acuna for that matter, was that they were just swinging at garbage pitches, man. They were just swinging at garbage pitches, and they were trying to pull everything. And pulling baseballs is not bad, but when you try to do it all the damn time, you're going to roll over more often than not. And if you don't have the legs to beat out some of those dribblers, like we all know Francisco Alvarez doesn't have, then you're in for a world of hurt. So I hope he made some adjustments, and I hope that he sticks to those adjustments after he went down and got demoted, and then he came back up and started just tearing the cover off the baseball before another unfortunate injury. I hope that's the version that we get. As it pertains to this being his last opportunity, I don't know if I would go that far, just because I haven't taken a look at like any sort of like free agent catchers out there. There's not any catchers that are going to be coming up and making a difference for this Mets team anytime soon. So for me right now, I would probably say it's 2026 and probably even 2027 for Alvarez to get it together. But that timeline is a little bit of a weird dynamic. So like, if it is his last chance, what direction do the Mets go in at the catching position? There's no prospect that's immediately going to backfill the shoes of Francisco Alvarez. And I mean, I can look up a quick free agent list, but I don't think that there's any notable catchers out there that'll truly make a difference if I'm not mistaken. So what would the Mets do? I just think that'd be too early to give up on a guy like that. But like you mentioned, if these injuries continue, then you're talking about a guy that is walking down the path of also being a future DH. And that's just not good news for him, really. So we'll see. I don't know if I would say 2026 is the end all be all though.
Well, you know what? I'm on this train now where I don't want my catcher to be offensive, a big part of the offense. I just don't want it anymore. Give me a great defensive catcher that works well with the rotation, and let's go. I think you need to work your offense in other parts of the diamond that helps you out offensively. I don't think you need to live or die. And unfortunately, I think the Mets really tried to have Alvarez a big. And again, it's not their fault, right? Alvarez showed a lot of promise with that bat, but again, with catchers, they can break down in a snap of a finger, and their offense is out the window. And if that's something that you're really counting on, you're pretty much in trouble. So again, I don't. If Alvarez shows up, I know he's very young, but again, the injuries are piling up, and he's not even 25 years old yet. Like, what do you think he's going to be when he's 28 years old and closer to 30? He's going to be broken down even more. So we have Luis Torrens, and I already said if Francisco Alvarez can't figure it out, I do not want Alvarez behind the plate. I just don't. Right? He was a problem for the New York Mets last year. Couldn't block balls, worried about framing way too much. It hurt his defensive game. Yes, he got better when he came back up, but he's the guy that, again, I forgot who said it in the comments. He has a low baseball IQ, right? He's a hard worker. We all know that, right? He tries to listen to what people are trying to tell him, the coaches and everything like that, but he doesn't have a high baseball IQ. And as a catcher who did have a good rapport with his rotation, but when you're constantly hurt, when you constantly mess up defensively, and you're not a good bat, you don't belong in this lineup. You just don't. And Luis Torrens, who is good with the rotation, who's a great defender, throws guys out with the best, probably one of the best in the league. You have to think about that, especially if this lineup is supposed to do with what we're all hoping them to do, right? A lot of clutch guys that don't strike out a lot, somewhat of a high average top of the lineup now. A lot of those guys in this lineup where we could see Luis Robert Jr. I think he's going to have a really good season. I don't think he's going to have 2023 season, but I think he's going to have a really good season. This is an opportunity for Francisco Alvarez to really show if he should be belonging on his team long term. Because yeah, I know he's not a free agent for a couple more years. He is a guy that I don't think the Mets see as a potential star anymore. I think they're hoping that it happens, but you can't live or die with a guy like that. If he becomes a really good defensive catcher and the bats whatever, I think they can deal with it. But you can't be counting on that bat right now. And the Mets are telling you they're not counting on that bat because they still have Beatty here. They still got Vientos here. They brought in, Bichette, Polanco, Simeon. In this lineup, they got Luis Robert Jr. They're not looking for Alvarez to be a big a part of this offense. If he becomes that guy, great. But their moves tell you that they're trying to get all the offense in this lineup as they possibly can with the additions they added. And Alvarez is kind of a guy that's going to be batting 7th or 8th in this lineup. Like that's a fact. And with his talent, he shouldn't be batting 7th or 8th. He should be between 4 and 6 in this lineup, or at least 4 and 5 in this lineup. But he's got to stay healthy and he's got to prove it. So Alvarez is another question mark that is all over this team right now. Even though I think, I don't know if it's just me, but do you feel like a lot of Met fans are kind of excited about this team, right? If you listen to MLB Network, all of a sudden, the Mets are one of the favorites to win the NL East. Like, people are picking the Mets to win the NL East. Like, that's something that's a little like, whoa. The Phillies are the champions of that. They had a weird offseason. We know the Braves are healthy, made a couple of good additions in their bullpen. And I feel like the Braves are going to be better than some people think because they're going to be healthy. I think the Phillies are going to have a down season. I think they're on the verge of just blowing up, to be quite honest with you, and going into oblivion, in my opinion. Like, they're basically running it back, and guys are getting older. Their outfield is absolutely garbage. There's big questions with Wheeler with his health right now. I think the Phillies are going to take a step back. I think it's between the Mets and the Braves winning this division. And it seems like it's excitement with Met fans about this team, even though there's question marks for sure. There seems to be, I'm not saying hope, and maybe we're just trying really hard to get a good team here because we desperately want it and need it. What is your feeling, Chris, around Met fans? Do you feel like they're more excited about this team than they were a month ago?
It depends on what type of Mets fan you're talking about, because there are two types of Mets fans right now in the era of David Stearns. Are you a Stearns believer? Are you a Stearns truther? Or are you a Stearns non-believer? I think that's what it boils down to. Because I think with what I've seen, fans will go to great lengths if they don't like David Stearns to give this guy credit. And I've seen people say, you know, okay, we have a decent offseason on our hands, but these guys have to go out there and perform now. If they're not winning, the division, then what are we really celebrating for here? So, I do sense that if you are an objective fan and you genuinely can see the light at the end of the tunnel with some of these moves that have been made this offseason with David Stearns, then I think people are excited. I'm excited about this season. Do I think they win the NL East? Maybe. I think this is a playoff team for sure. We said this in 2025 though, so we have to be careful about that type of wording. But we said the same thing in 2025, didn't happen. But I think that on paper, this team definitely, like, things have to go just like they did in 2025. Things had to go very wrong for that team not to make the playoffs. And everything that needed to go very wrong did go very wrong. And I'm just hoping that's not the case here in 2026. This is a playoff roster. I agree with you. The Phillies, their window has closed, and if it hasn't closed yet, this is basically the year that it probably will close, this year or next year. They're running it back with Kyle Schwarber, who basically disappears when the playoffs start. He has monstrous regular seasons. JT Realmuto is only getting older and worse based off the offensive numbers. Is Zach Wheeler even in the equation for them in the first half of the season, given the injury that he sustained? I'm not even sure.
They're not sure.
I'm not even sure. So the Phillies, they better hope that they get healthy late in the season and they're able to stay afloat, because their pitching is that good to keep them afloat. But I just don't see that team, perpetual choke artists, by the way, in the playoffs, really making a difference to put themselves above and beyond the rest of the pack in the NL East. And the Braves, I do think they're going to have a good season. Unfortunately, I think they're going to be healthy. And as long as the injuries don't plague them again, I think they'll be right there alongside the Phillies and the Mets. But we can't discount, a team like the Marlins either, man. The Marlins were practically, the reason why the Mets didn't even make it to the postseason. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's going to be a very tough division. I'm looking forward to it, but there's no reason why this team shouldn't be a playoff team, Rob, with the way that it currently stands. I know we've been talking about all the question marks in the world, the defense, the starting rotation. What version are we going to get of these guys? These guys should be in the playoffs. No ifs, ands, or buts. And it would be a massive failure yet again if that doesn't happen. And it depends on the way that it doesn't happen. Like last year, we could point towards the rotation. They fell apart. The bullpen fell apart thereafter. The offense was abysmal in the first half before they finally started to heat up in the second half. I really hope they come out of the gate swinging, literally and figuratively, because that is going to make us fans forget about 2025 like it never even happened. But once you get a division lead, let's keep it this time. Let's keep it this time.
Yeah, we have a tendency of choking it away. Yeah, I honestly think it is huge for the Mets to start off strong this year. Again, the fans, of course, we have to play Pittsburgh on opening day, the team we can never beat. And unfortunately, we've watched it firsthand last year, Chris, in person, unfortunately, wasting our time and our money. We probably drank more beer than watched that game, I tell you. But
100%.
but yeah, look, they got to start off strong, right? We all know Mendoza's on the hot seat. We know David Stearns. The fan base is, as much as they don't want to say it, they did say it, but they kind of turned a new leaf with these additions later in the offseason to get some fans to go away from the Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil situation that happened earlier in the offseason, and Diaz for that matter. They need to start off strong because there will be a lot of boo birds. There will be a lot of boos in that ballpark that the Mets cannot have. This is a fragile organization right now. They have an owner going back at fans on X this offseason. We've had a lot of questions with David Stearns and why did he break up the core? Some were very upset at that. He changed this team dramatically this offseason. If they don't start off strong, there's a lot of things that can go wrong with this fan base, and we've seen it before, right? We're dying for a winner. We're trying to win, right? That homegrown talent nonsense is out the window at this point, right? You got homegrown talent that probably nobody likes, except for Nolan McLean at this point, and possibly Carson Benge. The New York Mets need to start off strong, and I looked briefly at the beginning of the season, or the first month of the season. I'm not sure where we rank in terms of the teams we face, but when it comes to how hard it is, but they need a strong April. I know April doesn't make or break, but we've seen what end of June, end of May into July, it can kill a season rather quickly. And right now, Chris, I'm hoping for the best at this point, right? I'm trying to be optimistic. I am optimistic. Let me not, let me throw that negative crap out, right? We had a weird, crazy. I'm down south now. I see snow every fucking day now, and I live down south. I don't even understand it anymore. But whatever. Optimism is fun, but sometimes you got to be realistic. Sometimes, and there's a ton of question marks, but there is belief because Met fans are baseball fans in general. When baseball comes, everybody feels good. And it's just what we have to deal with right now. But, any final thoughts, Chris, with the rest of the offseason? And listen, 9 days away until pitchers and catchers report. I'm ready to talk real baseball.
I am too. I mean, spring training coverage. Just to expand a little bit more before we get out of here about the catching conversation, I see some people were talking about Parada. He had a pretty decent go at it in Double-A Binghamton. He had 10 home runs, 254. I mean, compared to what he was producing before in his minor league career, that was a very big step up for him. But then he got promoted towards the tail end of or the beginning actually of September, and he just failed in AAA, hitting like a $190 or something like that too. So I'm a little bit still skeptical about the whole Parada conversation. At once was a very hyped prospect, back in that 2022 draft, but he has been lost in that farm system. He's finally made it up to AAA. We'll see what he does this season, but he's got to get it going if he has any shot at making this major league roster next year. And then the guy from Minnesota, Ryan Jeffers, actually is coming off of a couple of really good seasons, is going to be a free agent too. So that's an option. I took a little bit of a sneak peek at the 2027 offseason or 2026 offseason catching free agent list alongside a name like Dalton Varsho. I don't think he caught any last year, but he can catch. Who cares? Whatever. I hope Alvarez puts this discussion behind us and really has a tremendous season through and through. I cannot wait to cover spring training. We'll be doing some of the post-game coverage as well for spring training, but really when it gets down to that game one, against the Pirates, Skeens versus Peralta,
Oh, yeah.
City Field. I cannot wait. I wish I could go to that game. Honestly, maybe I might just make the move to go to that game. I don't know. That's still very much up in the air if I can make that happen. But all I know is that I can't wait to get on this computer and talk about some post-game streams for our 2026 New York Mets. It should be an exciting season. And if you haven't subscribed to both channels already, make sure to go ahead and do so. We'll, have coverage for you all season long. This is not just an off-season thing, in season as well. So I appreciate it, and good stream. Even with the lack of news,
Yep.
there's still a lot to talk about with this roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, I got to drive up north when I'm going there for opening day. So if you need a pickup when I get to the DMV area, I'll let you know. But yeah, so listen, guys, it's February. It's the month of spring training. There'll probably be one, maybe two more hot stoves right before pitchers and catchers report, and then we go into baseball mode. We're going to regular season mode, spring training mode. We'll do our post game shows for spring training, and we'll also do spring training reports probably weekly or twice a week, whatever, just to give us the rundown on younger players, everything that's going on in spring training throughout spring training for the first month and a half of spring training. And again, spring training stops because of the WBC. Was it March? It starts and all that fun stuff as well. So, that cuts short because of the WBC. So with that said, guys, thank you for tuning in to Mets Hot Stove, February 1st, 9 days until pitchers and catchers report. Thank you for watching, guys. Have a good night. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time, guys. Good night.
Let's go Mets.
the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life because the Mets are